You know, it's like I listen to Kyle. I literally feel like I'm reading the culture critique as he speaks. It's everywhere. He makes it convoluted, but not convoluted enough for, a 3-digit IQ to catch on to his behavior.
Seriously,
That's what you deny.
You just go into the beep. Beep does not compute.
Oh, come on. You're such, it's so amazing how dishonest you are. Anti-capitalism on the right does not have a constituency. It's a bunch of Natsock losers. People who have basically Natsock positions are uniformly losers in their personal life, are uniformly going nowhere. That's how it works.
They are National Socialist, you creep.
Natsock is not strong. The issue is...
Are you calling me a National Socialist, you creep?
You're historically illiterate, dude.
You look at places like London, San Francisco, Vancouver, that, yeah, it's great if you're rich. Not so great if you're not rich. If you're not rich, increasingly you can't afford to live in the places where you work. And I mean, the welfare people are there, and the welfare people are, increasingly aggressive, right? So I guess what you want to do is to isolate yourself as much as you can. But I suppose that this is the ideal result of globalism, that you've got the 1%, and at the other end, you've got the welfare staters and the crazies, the people who reject welfare, who are determined to live by their wits. And the middle class is not allowed. Because you see that the globalists have much more in common with the welfare staters than they do with the middle class. That the middle class is a threat to them. So they're happy that the middle class is exiled. The middle class doesn't like being patted on the head, condescended to. And, the welfare class is happy enough to be condescended to so long as there's money, that comes with it. But, I'm fascinated by this because this idea that people don't need things anymore. Where this started was Robin Urbach, who used to write for the National Post and now writes for the CBC. Today in Toronto real estate, a 200 square foot apartment for $11.50 a month. 200 square feet for $11.50 a month. That, you don't need possessions. Why would you need possessions? Everything you need is on your smartphone. Yeah, I mean, you want to live light, right? The problem with that is that this goes against human nature. Even the serfs of the Middle Ages had a few precious possessions which were passed on from generation to generation. But you see how you see globalism. People like Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs was very big on this idea that possessions were evil, that everything that you need, you can buy over and over again from the Apple store. So, it wasn't exactly disinterested, his opinion on this. But you see how this plays into the goals of the 1%. Oh, no, man, it's only old people. It's only boomers that own things. You don't want to be a boomer, do you? No, God, no, I don't want to be a boomer. Those people are horrible. Yeah. So don't be like them. Don't own things. Don't own anything. And then you'll truly be free. Free to stream. Free to stream over and over again. You can buy, Blu-rays for $6 now. But no, you just want to stream them over and over again because you wouldn't want to own it. No, I don't want to own anything. God knows I don't want to own anything. I noticed that millennials, that you walk into their houses and there's nothing on the walls. They don't have any pictures on the walls. They don't have little chests full of, knickknacks or any of those other things. There's just some furniture. Often the furniture is, very badly treated because, we're going to move and move again and move again. So, who cares if the cat rips up the furniture or, dog pisses on it or whatever, right? And, it's just perfect. It's perfect. We are guaranteeing you a future where you don't own anything, and we will train you to say that's what you want.
It's enlightening to look at personal responsibility and the attitudes towards personal responsibility that you see in the middle class and in the global elite. In the global elite, you see marriage, for instance, marriage that is lasting and family creation that is lasting. You see in the middle class something like that. But then in the welfare class, you have less lasting marriages. You have less responsibility in terms of personal finances, in terms of use of drugs, in terms of all sorts of things that represent your character. So I think that character is a uniting force in this respect, and does reflect an attitude towards life. Generally speaking, the middle class in America looks up to the rich, the people who have made it, and they want to be like that. And that's something that is part of the American spirit, and part of why America was so successful relative to Europe, where the lower class looks enviously upon the upper class and does not look with aspirations to the higher echelons of society. It's good to have a middle class that aspires to be in the higher echelons of society, and to have higher echelons of society that exemplify virtues like marriage, like stable family formation and hard work. And that is something that the elite overall does exemplify. And that is why I will again and again reject a sort of total condemnation of the elite. There are virtues there. And in fact, that's where the highest concentration of virtue is. Despite a lot of the delusions that they have, a lot of the problems that emit from them, they are the highest concentration of virtue, the least likely to murder, the least likely to divorce, the least likely to engage in all sorts of irresponsible behaviors.
They pull up the drawbridge and they say, every man for himself. We got ours. The elite, for at least half a century, has been telling the lower classes, forget all this stuff about propriety. Forget about what other people think about you. Be free. Choice is the highest virtue. If it feels good, do it. Hey, in the bad old days, we used to tell you what to do. We used to say that this was acceptable behavior and this was unacceptable behavior, but we've learned our lesson. That what's really important is that if you think it's a good thing, then it's a good thing. We're not going to lay any guilt trips on you. Now, it's not a coincidence that the elite advocating this to the lower orders makes it far less likely that there will be competition coming up against them from the lower orders. Hey, schools are far too regimented. Oh, everyone's sitting in a row of desks and being silent unless spoken to. No, we got to change that. So the elite wrecked the public schools and wrecked them deliberately. Meanwhile, they all go to private schools. Or guess what? Old-fashioned discipline still applies. The hypocrisy of the elite is off the charts, and their venality cannot be underestimated ever.
This is where I find Greg Cochran's attitude so refreshing. Greg Cochran sent his sons to a minority-dominated high school, a public high school, where they excelled, where they became, where they went on to high-tier colleges and success. And it was because of his belief, his firm belief, that it's not the school that makes the student, but the student's own virtues that make the student. I think that's an attitude that is backed up by the data, and it's the reality is that this retreat from preaching that you see in the elite is not some dastardly plan to bring down everyone else, but is a reflection of the lack of confidence that the elite have in themselves. They refuse to view themselves and their ways as superior, even when it is quite clear that they are superior. This retreat of the elite is representative of the collapse of the foundations of society, of what keeps society together, which is the people who are the best, who are the most productive, saying very clearly, this is how you should be, this is the path that you should take.
I think your naivety is barely believable, and sometimes I think that you're trolling us because the 1% consumes more and more of the wealth, and they become more and more powerful, but somehow they're afflicted with a crisis of confidence. Okay, if you say so, Kyle.
I think I know them better than you.
Kyle, hello, I love you, but I came on here to yell at you. I saw you were talking about the crisis of confidence of the elites. A lot of people are ascribing it to malice. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because it's ultimately an abandonment of the most fundamental responsibility, which is keep society together, which is not happening. The fact that streams like this even exist and there's so much dissent is evidence of that. So, you know, it's an abandonment of responsibility at the end of the day.
But look at Trump. Trump is incredibly arrogant, and he's saying, I'm the best, my way is best, and he's the most paternalistic, the most caring, the most protective of the interests of the people. The people who retreat from this responsibility, who are kind of pseudo-elites and who refuse to extol their own greatness directly, but rather do it indirectly in the shadows in a sneaky way, they're the most malignant elites. So I like the Donald Trumps, I like the Peter Thiels, I like the people who embrace their own greatness and who own their own elite status, and thus have that sense of responsibility. Those who sort of don't embrace their own straightforward, their own straightforward in a way superiority, their own success and their own demonstration of virtue. They are the ones who are malignant. They sort of refuse to embrace who they are and what they have earned. I think that the elite has sort of thought itself in spirals and ruined itself by doing that. Chasing its own tail and getting more and more complicated. I like the Trump approach. Cuts through the Gordian knot with a sword. God bless it.
You're missing the point, Kyle. You're missing the point. In the old days, the elite was in a position of wagging their fingers at people below them in the social stratum and saying, don't do this, don't do that, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. They were expected to maintain WASP respectability. Now, if you wag your fingers at people, particularly those that have less than you, you are going to be hated. If you are expected to maintain WASP respectability, then you are going to either you're not going to get to do what you want, or it's going to be much more difficult for you to do so. This abdication of responsibility by the upper class has been entirely to their advantage because, hey, we're not stuck up like we used to be. We're down with the kids. And, hey, we're pretty much alike, you and I. Hey, look, I'm wearing the same ripped jeans as you are. So, hey, money, not a big deal. Freedom, that's the big deal. And my position is you should have as much freedom as you want.
Hell yeah. Yeah, freedom and personal responsibility. That's what they need to embrace. And that's not exactly what they're embracing. They're embracing collectivism. They're embracing the notion that they have collective guilt and collective responsibility. And it's not really that they are great, but rather that they have this position of privilege over others. And it's an emaciating doctrine that is destroying the elite as it destroys society.
You don't believe in society. You talk about collectivism. Society is a collectivity. Okay? All efforts by more than one person are collective efforts. Your use of the word collectivism, your expansive use of it, goes to the heart of everything that is wrong with what you argue for.
I mean, there's this abdication of personal responsibility that I see in all the people who criticize the use of the term collectivism. And I think that ultimately personal responsibility leads to personal greatness. It leads to success. It leads to groups of people who people want to be inside of. I think that the elite, while to an extent, it denies its own elite status by embracing collectivism, by embracing collective guilt, the notion of privilege, all these things. These things compound to erode the ground on which society has to be built. I think that, like, ultimately, you can just see the results of people who embrace collectivism, and I'm going to put that. I think that term is very apropos. People who who try to absolve themselves of responsibility for their own actions inevitably are the kind of people whose success does not accrue to. And these groups of people who refuse to take individual responsibility for their actions, who try to disperse authority and responsibility as much as possible, they end up losing. So obviously, there's a point at which libertarianism, as you say, becomes autistic. But I don't think I'm at that point. I very well recognize the need for organization and the need for people to be leaders. But ultimately, you have in the elite, in non-malignant elites, a very strong sense of one's personal responsibility and one's personal autonomy and agency in the world.
It's very easy to preach personal responsibility to those people who, well, the expression was they were born on third base. Well, these people aren't born on third base. They're born and they've already hit a home run. You're familiar with this form of slave labor that's called the intern system?
Sure.
Oh, so some smart young some man or woman thinks, yeah, the entertainment industry. I'd like to get into the entertainment industry. I'd like to, start at MTV or whatever. I'm prepared to be a gopher. People used to start in the mailroom or whatever. I'm willing to do that. Well, they can't because they don't pay for these positions. And I used to think the reason they didn't pay for it is because they're cheap. No, the reason they don't pay for these positions is to enforce class solidarity. So they don't get any uppity middle class or lower class people busting up their oligarchy. Because the thing is, if your daddy isn't rich enough to look after you for several years in the intern system, and when you're living in a place like New York City, which is very, very expensive, you don't get to get into these industries anymore. And this is just one of the ways in which the 1% has, pulled the drawbridge up and said, oh, yeah, so long, suckers, every man for himself, personal responsibility. I'm a libertarian myself. I know that's pretty daring of me because everyone is left wing here, but I'm a libertarian and I believe in personal responsibility. And that has absolutely nothing to do with the fact that libertarian is entirely, concurrent with a system that has allowed me and people like me to shut off all possible competition. It's just an accident I'm a libertarian.
I mean, I wish that the elite had the cohesion that you describe. And if they did have the cohesion that you describe, then this world would be a better place. I do want to create that kind of cohesion and encourage it. And yes, libertarianism would be a tool. I wish the elite was more libertarian than it is. I think that this notion that some moat is in the way of someone's success if they're intelligent, if they're driven, if they're responsible, I think that that's nonsense. Most billionaires are self-made, and you can succeed if you are if you take personal responsibility. If you don't make gigantic mistakes, you should end up with a fairly prosperous life. And standards of living have increased and increased and increased for working men across the years in this country. I think it's a tremendous success, and it's not one that is owned by the elite, because the elite is enmeshed in this doctrine of privilege, this guilt, and this runs along, of course, racial lines, which you should be conscious of. This white guilt is part and parcel of what I am describing.
And your elite is pushing white guilt to the hilt. And by the way,
they're mostly white.
Standards of living for working class Americans have fallen precipitously since the 1970s. That's a fact. That's not my opinion. It used to be possible. It used to be possible.
It's guilt on themselves.
Look, there comes a point where, argument is unavailing, because every time that you're pinned down on something, you pivot. Every single time you pivot. And this idea that, the elite has lost its confidence, and you wish that they had more cohesion. If they had more cohesion, the rest of us would be killing each other to eat rats. Seriously, that's what would happen. The level of contempt they have for ordinary people.
It's like I listen to Kyle. I literally feel like I'm reading the culture critique as he speaks. It's everywhere. He makes it convoluted, but not convoluted enough for, you know, a 3-digit IQ to catch on to his behavior. And I mean, this, how many more years of this do we have to endure at this point? You know, I want the media back. Can we have our media back? You know, what about the educational system? You know, could the kids go to school and be taught the truth instead of a narrative that denigrates them, diminishes their confidence? I mean, how much do we have to take? How much? How many more years? Could I get a roundabout, what, like another decade of this torture I have to endure, or what?
Many more decades, probably.
Yeah, exactly.
That the West done.
Sorry, many more decades. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
What do you mean it's not going to work?
I'm sick of this.
You look at the future and you simply extrapolate from the past. You're not even extrapolating from the present because you don't understand the present. That you think the rich people know best, and the rich people want what's best for you, and the elite has your best interest at heart. That is not 2019. Maybe that's 2006, but you're extrapolating from 2006. Things are changing.
I've described how the ideology of the elite will lead to the destruction of civilization. So I don't know why you think that I'm saying that the elites always know best. I'm saying that they're the most virtuous members of society, and that's indisputably true. They're the ones who are the hardest working. They're the ones who are least likely to commit crimes. They're the ones who are ultimately the most successful because mostly of their hard work and their lack of mistakes, lack of terrible mistakes that they make in their lives.
Are you kidding? Are you kidding?
Ridiculous.
Goldman Sachs executives. That's what the statistics say.
Hey, wait.
Goldman Sachs executives boasted that they had sold junk, shit sandwiches, they called it, to their best customers in order to line their own pockets to become filthy rich. Yeah, this is the morality that you are extolling.
Look, it's just ridiculous. You are denying science about IQ, science about personal responsibility, science about how people lead their lives, illegitimacy, all these things that correlate with being elite, and you're denying it because it's inconvenient to you. Ultimately, if you deny these sorts of science, then you deny everything that you stand on in order to deny white privilege, in order to deny socialism, in order to deny all these things that you supposedly decry. It is a white male elite that you are decrying. It is a white male elite that you are saying is this absolutely destructive force in the world. You are the voice of enemy. You are the voice of the destruction of Western civilization. Kyle, I am defending Western civilization while you are destroying it from the margins. That's exactly what's happening.
God.
You are discrediting the actual right that can succeed.
You have no connection to Western civilization except as an abstraction.
Elites have these statistical associations that represent a certain logic of why they succeed. If you deny that logic, then you deny the logic that defends the achievements of white people and the achievements of higher performing minorities. And you are the voice of socialism, the voice of racialist socialism.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
oligarchy.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know the word oligarchy,
of the enemy,
Kyle?
of those who are attempting to destroy what we call the hegemonic white masculinity. Those are you are in lockstep with them in terms of their policies that they are doing to actively destroy what remnants of white male power are there. It's ultimately an attempt to guilt these people into denying their own virtues, and it is succeeding. And you are assisting that by denying the science, by denying the truth of what makes people succeed.
Do you know the word oligarchy? Do you know what it means?
Yep.
Okay. Do you know why the percentage of white people in major public schools in the United States is typically around 10 to 20%? I think in Chicago it's something like 11%. Do you know why that is?
That
Kyle?
Sounds wrong, but I mean,
you know why that is?
You mean in inner cities? You mean in inner cities?
No, I
that
mean
sounds like
in big
Boston
cities
numbers.
like New York, Chicago, Seattle, etc.
That's because they've gone to the suburbs. They've gone to the suburbs. There's been white flight.
It is because the schools have been destroyed. That the elite have deliberately destroyed public schools.
Nonsense. They're going to different public schools.
They control the education.
Not inner city public schools. It's just complete nonsense what you're saying.
It doesn't matter.
It's complete nonsense what you're saying, because it's not like public schooling has been destroyed. It's been destroyed in these specific places where all the white people have left. But that's not the destruction of public schools. They're going to different public schools.
Because the elite pushed them out of the cities, of the communities they had founded, Kyle.
Because of white guilt, because of the notion of white privilege, because of the notion that they did not deserve their place in these cities. The embrace of that by white people, especially the white elite, is what destroyed it. White people were the ones who started this sort of white guilt stuff. If you look at the Puritans, they had these attitudes. The Puritans had these attitudes. You are just ignorant.
Do you think that the Catholics and the Italians and the Polish started this white guilt? Do you think that are you seriously telling me that the people living on Park Avenue,
the Protestants who founded this damn country, not the damn Catholics, the Protestants who founded this country were the ones who founded white guilt?
Look, your friends in the elite pushed out the white ethnics because they saw them as a threat. They saw them as a threat. You look at the destruction of the last 60 years and you think, well, if only IQ had been 3.5% higher, this wouldn't have happened.
That's so ridiculous. You're being so ridiculous right now because because your advocacy is so impractical, so out of tune with what the right is, with what success is on the right. You are preaching leftist doctrine and trying to be right wing about racial relations. It doesn't work. It has no constituency. You can't be left wing about economics, but then deny that the people who are quote unquote oppressed by economics, primarily people of color, have a case. That's what you're doing. It's illogical. Nobody has that position because it's not a tenable position. If you deny, if you grant the socialists their case that these capitalists are exploitative, then you're saying that white people are exploitative because that's the most successful capitalists. You are granting the very claims of the people who you supposedly are the enemy of. It doesn't work as a political doctrine. It does
work as a political doctrine, actually, because
it's not Trump's political doctrine.
I have said this over again.
You're not supporting Trump, are you? You're not supporting Trump, are you? Because you repeatedly stand against Trump.
The position you advocate is supported by 3% of the American people.
Nonsense.
3%.
You've said yourself that the elite are libertarian. That's what you've said yourself, that the elite are libertarian. Now you can't retreat from that if you're gonna use that sort of caricature of the elite. But moreover, listen to what Donald Trump does.
3%.
Wait, Donald Trump.
You heard of the 1%, Kyle? You just made my case for me.
Who has the position that I'm advocating for? Does Donald Trump have the position that I'm advocating for? Or does he have the position that you're advocating for? Does Donald Trump support high taxes? Does Donald Trump support this notion that capitalism is exploitative? You stand against Donald Trump, but try to be for Donald Trump. The reason why Donald Trump succeeds is that his ideology has a certain coherence in terms of being right-wing. You can't be right-wing and anti-capitalist, especially in the 21st century, where you have these aspects of race relations.
Capitalism is not right-wing. Capitalism is
Donald Trump a capitalist or not? Is Donald Trump a capitalist or not?
Has Donald Trump attacked General Motors? Has he attacked Harley Davidson? Has he attacked all of these companies which put profits ahead?
It's ridiculous to
he's not in the sense that you are.
He's a capitalist. Yes,
he's not in the sense that you are.
He's even more of a capitalist than I am. He's even more of a capitalist, more of a defender of wealth, more of a defender of privilege than even I am.
He is a defender of earned wealth, not unearned wealth.
Whatever. He's a defender. He's a defender. What? Did his tax cuts only affect people who you believe earn wealth? And who gives a damn what you think people have earned? Who gives a damn what you think people have earned? That's not for you to decide.
Oh, it isn't? Well, no, maybe it's not for me to decide, but I'm afraid that legislatures decide these things. They decide.
Okay.
They decide tax rights.
Side with the left then, Kevin.
What's that?
Side with the left then. Side with the left then. Go become a Democrat. That's your constituency there.
The libertarians were very foolishly invited to the right in the 1960s, and they proceeded to destroy it. Them and the neoconservatives destroyed the right, and now people like you are being flushed out. And I can see why you're upset.
You repeatedly counter-signal Trump's exact policies and then refuse to acknowledge that you're doing it. That's cowardice. Trump is exactly the opposite of what you say on all these levels, on LGBT people, on capitalism. Yes, he is. Yes,
he has attacked capitalists again and again.
He has attacked some capitalists, but he defends capitalism. Does he defend global trade or not? He's defended global trade explicitly. Okay, he's even more of a globalist than I am. Okay, so it's ridiculous for you to say,
Trump
he is.
Has
That's a fact. You're just not
he's a protectionist, right?
Attacked globalism. He has repeatedly attacked companies which put profits ahead of America.
He's defended it more than I have. He's defended the global system of global trade more than I have. Has defended his own trade deals vociferously, which are more free trade than I would support. He has also defended LGBT people. He has done all these things that I say he has done, and that you decry. So again, the fact is that your brand of the right is incoherent and defeats itself.
My brand of the right is the future.
Of the elite.
Your brand of the right lives in the heads of very few people, has never been popular, has served to wreck the middle class and push the lower class into misery.
My right wing is Donald Trump's right wing.
You have no connection whatsoever with the real world.
I have a connection with Donald Trump's policies, while you decry Donald Trump's policies and constantly counter-signal exactly what Donald Trump is doing, and then try to make yourself out to be the new wave of the right.
I have been extolling Donald Trump since early 2016.
I know, but that's on the record. His policies. I'm not talking about him. You always praise him, but you implicitly counter-signal his exact policy.
Why do you argue like you're from the inner city? You keep waving words like they're talisman. They have no magic power, Kyle.
Is Donald Trump's position on LGBT
if you repeat
your position or not?
If you repeat the same thing 100 times, it doesn't make it
and you can't
true.
Answer. Why are you dodging questions and accusing me of dodging questions? You're
Donald Trump has put America ahead of profits. You do the reverse.
You're redefining things. You're dodging around Donald Trump's positions on global trade. While I make my points about Donald Trump's position on the global trade, you dodge Donald Trump's position on the LGBT people, while I point out Donald Trump's positions on LGBT people, and you retreat from the argument again and again while accusing me of changing around what I'm arguing.
Hey, who's pushing transsexuals out of the U.S. military, Kyle? Let me give you a hint. His last name has 5 letters. Can you guess? Can you guess, Kyle?
Who's over and over?
Can you guess?
Who is over and over?
If I repeat that 100 times, I'll win. Right? Right, Kyle?
Yeah. Look, ultimately, transgender people are not actually being pushed out of the military, first of all. But second of all, his vociferous support of LGBT people is repeatedly and emphasized in his campaign, where he's waving his rainbow flag, where he's talking about how it doesn't matter which bathroom trans people go to; they should just go to whatever bathroom they feel is right. He didn't have to make those statements, but he did. Right? That is a representative of his position, and you keep trying to dodge around that.
Who has gone to the Supreme Court to get transsexuals out of the military, Kyle?
Yeah, as if that undoes all the rest of the stuff that he's done, which is putting him out in front of the Republican Party in terms of support of LGBT people.
Putting them out front.
Yes, his position on LGBT people, on bathrooms. Hey, address his position on bathrooms. He says that the trans people should just go to whatever bathroom they feel like they should go to.
Yeah,
okay?
so
is that out in front of the Republican mainstream position? Yeah, it is. And he is the front runner in that position, and that represents his position on LGBT people overall.
No, it does not.
Yes, it does.
He makes a gesture.
How can you deny that? It's not just a gesture.
He makes a gesture. He says one thing.
It's also waving the rainbow flag.
Look, the problem with arguing with you, Kyle, is that generally about 2 or 3 minutes in any discussion, you get to your very illogical captain does not compute stage.
Kevin. You're always dodging the argument.
You just repeat the same things over and over again. Talking about IQ.
You refuse to acknowledge what evidence suggests.
The elite. You see,
you refuse to acknowledge that is a white male elite. Kevin, that is a white male elite.
I don't care what color it is.
Yeah. I know you don't care.
Yeah, there are friends because they're the same.
Of
they're the
racialist
same
socialism, ultimately, which will destroy what you claim to defend. You claim to be a defender of Western civilization. You claim to be a defender of the interests of the white race, and then you proceed to take actions that are going to destroy those very interests.
Rubbish. You worship money. You worship Moloch. Okay, and the fact that the people who are exploiting us have white skins means nothing to me. They're not our friends.
You mean to destroy white?
You see any white person, and of course it helps if they're rich, and you say,
white people are
I must stand
Kevin,
with that
who are the first
person.
Capitalists? Kevin, who invented capitalism?
I don't care.
Yeah, you don't care. You don't care about these core issues of civilization and the West, and then you pretend to be serious.
You are completely nuts on the racial issue. You think that white people are beyond criticism because you have white skin.
No, they're not beyond criticism. I'm saying that you are in lockstep with the criticisms of white people that are laid by the West, by the left.
I don't care that other people share my criticisms. We live in an oligarchy now. The people you worship have created an oligarchy. They have crushed economic opportunity from potential enemies. They have raised barriers of entry to the competition, and you acclaim all of this thing because of your berserk obsession with race. You have a berserk obsession with race.
So you refuse to acknowledge any sort of practical racial interests, and then you accuse me of being the impractical one.
A practical racial interest does not include worshiping billionaires. Give your head a shake.
Kyle, I think that you're doing this thing that I often see with libertarians where they're trying to search for logical consistency in politics when often it's like a statement of identity, like this is our group. I agree that some of these policies are throwing important bones. I don't think it will make peace at all, because I think that as the elite have committed themselves to waging war on this identity, which I feel is wrong, but ultimately it's not about the economic interests. I mean, if you blow up the United States and Western civilization, all the fiat money in the world doesn't mean shit because it becomes paper again. But it's not about these rational economic interests. That's not what motivates men. That's not what stirs the passion in their hearts. It's identity and the transcendent and culture. And that, I think that's what Kevin and you are always butting heads about. Is I think Kevin is focused on, you know, this identity, which I agree it's important to this country. And I think that perhaps all the commodification of things, like especially like, well, I like to defend usury in the chat, but you know, people respond against that.
You don't understand. But there is a political war right now between the right and the left. And the left has the position of sort of what was it called? Liberation theology, race relations, where we embrace the lower IQ races and say you are exactly like us, and all that stands between us is our privilege. And if you are anti-capitalist, then you essentially acknowledge all the points of this doctrine. You can't pick and choose what parts of science you decide to actually acknowledge. You can't pick and choose and say, oh, well, I believe in the IQ thing when it comes to whites and blacks, but when it comes to the elites and the and the lower class, it's like, well, who cares about IQ? Or what are you, autistic?
So,
you care about IQ?
What
it's just ridiculous.
It's not a measure of morality, Kyle.
It's a measure. Exactly. It is a measure of morality.
No, it is not a measure of morality.
Yes, it's a measure of your criminality. Is it a measure of your criminality or not?
You would have us.
Is it a measure of your criminality or not? Stop dodging, Kevin. Stop dodging, Kevin. Is it a measure of your criminality or not?
Now you're sounding like you're 7 years old. Okay.
You're sounding like someone who's dodging a question again and again, and then using insults. You dodge a question.
It is not a morality. It is not morality.
You dodge a question, then insult me reliably. Are you some sort of Markov bot? Does IQ correlate with criminality?
Does it correlate with criminality? Yeah, it correlates with criminality. That is not the same as conflating it with morality. What the hell is wrong with you?
Does criminality correlate with morality?
I answered your question. What the hell is wrong with you?
No, you didn't. Are you saying that criminality does not correlate with morality?
Is your CPU overheating, Kyle?
Stop dodging the question.
Do you have an extra go-to 10 line in your programming, Kyle?
Stop dodging the question. Stop insulting me and dodging the question. Did he say, or did he not say, that there is no correlation between criminality and morality?
KMG was saying that that there is a correlation, but they are not the same. Someone, I guess, could be low IQ but very moral. And
no. I want an answer to direct questions because this logic. No. Does criminality have a connection to morality or not? Does it have a connection to it or not? Criminality to morality.
It doesn't necessarily have. It does not mean the same thing because smart people use their intelligence to stay out of prison the way poor people can't because they're not smart enough. Next, you're going to have us cheer for Bernie Madoff. Why don't you make the case for him?
Yeah, Bernie Madoff is not like a mass murderer. Bernie Madoff is not like a mass murderer. It's not equivalent at all.
Did I call him a mass murderer?
The point is that's sort of the equivalency is that you have a lot more murderers on the lower end, and that represents far more harm to the social fabric, far more harm to people, far more of a representation of your lack of care for other people. Criminality represents lack of care for other people's concerns. Okay, that's the thing. And so when you deny the connection between criminality and morality, you're revealing yourself to be intellectually dishonest.
I am not denying a connection between criminality and IQ.
Are you deaf or something? I said criminality and morality, not IQ and morality.
Criminality and morality? Yes, of course there is a connection.
Yeah, and then between criminality and IQ. So that
you're making a syllogism
you have these two logical statements that come together. These two logical statements come together.
Smart people are more moral than less smart people, and that is idiotic.
Kevin, have you named the nose yet? Because here's the thing, like what I'm listening to is two people advocating for their self-interest and pretending like, the ideas and the rationalization for why they should be in charge somehow actually matter. I mean, it's Kyle's up here defending the value of capitalists, pretending they're white, but really we all know they're fellow whites. And, Kevin, it's like, this is I sort of kind of where you've been, where it's like, my impulse is towards economic freedom, and I would never want necessarily state control over many, many, many industries. But it's like, man, I'm looking for solutions to get my perspective back into power. And if, I got to be a little Machiavellian about it and, abandon my principles, then so be it.
Well, see, this is what people like Kyle don't understand. That after 49 people are killed in a gay club in Orlando, Florida, the president of the United States holds up a rainbow flag.
Yeah.
Immediately, oh my God, he's a gay leader. No, it's just a gesture made in the heat of the moment. You really don't understand, Kyle. You refuse to make the distinction between formal language and its real meaning, and that is one of the reasons why conversation with you is virtually impossible.
What nonsense. You also ignore the other things that Trump has said about LGBT people. You dodge every single one of those things, of those things that imply his position. And so
has
you
his
just deny
government made a formal effort to redefine, or as the trans people say, to define them out of existence?
Just moving the goalpost. He is friendly. He has a history of being friendly to the LGBT community. It's not just one or two data points.
Has his presidency taken concrete steps that LGBT people are screaming about, calling genocide and the like? Well, then you just answered your question. About anything.
No, I haven't, because he's far more friendly than you are to these things. His position is much closer to mine than to yours.
Seriously.
That's what you deny.
You just go to the beep. Beep does not compute.
Come on. You're such it's so amazing how dishonest you are in your arguments. You repeatedly insult and try to argue with ad hominems, and then you accuse me of being dishonest.
You have no empathy. You have no empathy. That is a serious lack.
Okay. I mean, look, I have plenty of empathy, especially for people who take responsibility for their own problems. I have empathy for people who take responsibility for their own problems and who have a practical perspective on how to dig themselves out of a hole that they're in. I don't have that much empathy for people who refuse to see the practicalities of their position. And again, it's like
your view is that, these people, they have no one to blame for them but themselves, because they should have chosen richer parents, or should have arranged to be born with a higher IQ.
They should. Well, look, ultimately, virtues are largely inherited. Okay, that's the reality, and that's why social mobility goes down as you have a society that reflects the virtues of people. When people who are virtuous get more and more rich, as opposed to the old system, which had a lot of people who were virtuous and who were extremely poor and were marginalized, right? Especially in the old world, as you have a more liberalized system, you have an eventual slowing of social mobility. That's not just in the U.S., but everywhere that has a consistent position of sort of meritocracy. Meritocracy will gradually decrease social mobility as people find their natural level. And then people like you will say, oh, this is evidence of an elite keeping down the deserving people. Well, I'm afraid to say that the deserving people that you describe are precisely the constituency of the left. And you will find that your position
I don't care.
ends up dovetailing. Yeah, I know you don't care. You don't care about practicalities. You don't care about the interests. You don't care about the interests.
Your kill shots.
You don't care about the interests of the people
left.
defend.
If you had the capacity for such thought,
do you understand what the left
you
implies?
should be seriously worried about the popularity of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Okay?
Of course I am.
You
and
should
your
be
positions
seriously.
dovetail with,
but
with
you
hers.
just. Oh yeah. Okay. Sure.
Not
sure
at
they
all.
do. Sure.
Yeah, they
do.
do. Yeah, they do.
If
you acknowledge that capitalism is this sort of oppressive force which oppresses people who are subject to it, then you acknowledge all of the claims of the third world.
Okay, it is not a god to be worshipped, Kyle.
All of the claims of the third world, and you acknowledge the moral need for mass migration, whether you recognize that or not.
You are completely bent out of shape. Okay?
You are.
Your
brand of politics has no constituency whatsoever. While you accuse my brand
Are you kidding me? You're in the 3% there.
Anti-capitalism on the right does not have a constituency. It's a bunch of losers.
Have you heard of Tucker Carlson? Hey, Kyle, ever heard of Tucker Carlson?
How come everyone who has that? Tucker Carlson is not a nat sock. Tucker Carlson has broadly Trumpist positions. Ultimately, he's not you in the closet. Okay, people who have basically nat sock positions are uniformly losers in their personal life. Are uniformly going nowhere. That's how it works.
They are national socialist. You creep.
Nat sock is not strong. The issue is.
Are you calling me a national socialist? You creep.
Nat sock is right-wing socialism. Nat sock is right-wing socialism. Nat sock is right-wing socialism.
Wait. Let's stop repeating. You were saying the right is this thing. Are you saying that you're the one to decide what the right is? Because I think that's what this is the larger argument. We're going down all these different rabbit holes, but isn't the more overarching thing that you're saying that the right is capitalism, total free market capitalism, or something like that? Is that what you're basically saying?
Well, no, it's not entirely equivalent with capitalism, but there is a broad alignment of interests, and anti-capitalist right-wing sentiment is broadly extremely marginal because by being anti-capitalist, you acknowledge the broad positions of the left. Unless you embrace a sort of ethno-nationalism, that's the only way that you get out of having a moral issue with the fact that you have this capitalist system which is oppressing all of these people around the world, right? If you want to get out of that position, you have to say that the moral world is a limited world by ethnicity. And this is a position that some people take, but it is a position that is extremely marginal and held essentially only by people whose personal lives are utterly fake.
Why is that the only other option?
Hold on, Kyle. What constituency is the white working class? Do you think they are like staunch capitalists, all that low tax rates for corporations because it's just growth and social value?
They're for taking away regulations on coal. They're for taking away these sorts of punishing regulations on industry.
That's such a narrow conception. That's
what the American right turns into. That's what the American right turns into ultimately. I mean, and there's a broad support for deregulation. There's this notion that in America, basically the poor people view themselves as dispossessed millionaires, and that is the white working class, not the non-white working class. Okay, that's the attitude of the white working class.
Deregulation.
They believe
still believing that government has a role in punishing bad actors in the private sector.
Yeah, sure, but the issue is it's essentially redistribution. Like the notion of redistribution sort of puts you into a completely different camp, and that's ultimately what is implied by anti-capitalism. The white working class in America is strongly capitalist, and so they're not entirely laissez-faire, but they are capitalist.
Aren't they protectionists? I mean, like you were talking about also
protectionist.
Kyle,
Protectionism is consistent with capitalism. Ultimately, protectionism can be consistent with capitalism, and that's why I'm way more protectionist than Donald Trump. Yes, absolutely. A free market within a country is one thing, but allowing other countries to subsidize their industries and then outcompete ours is a different story entirely.
He uses words that generally do not correspond to their accepted meaning.
Okay.
Look, I'll give Kyle I'll give him a little history lesson. Okay. The right, the conservatives, always viewed capitalism with deep suspicion. Manchester liberalism the ideology of the Industrial Revolution, not right-wing, not conservative. This is history. You don't know it. And I don't know that I want to continue arguing with someone who is so ignorant of the bases of what he claims to support.
I mean, you fail to understand the very basic dynamics of politics in this country, where you have a white working class that is in favor of free enterprise, that is in favor of deregulation and low taxes.
Are wrong.
That's what the white working class is in favor of.
How would you
small business people? That's why they're always talking about small business people in their ads. Why are they always talking about small business people?
You don't even know the difference between the working class and the bourgeoisie.
You don't know. You don't recognize that your position is absolutely untenable in modern politics.
There's such a huge difference between small business and corporate elite. You talk about elite; these are not small business owners. Like the working class is the electrician that would like to have low regulations so he can quickly start up an LLC to work for himself. Okay, right. That is the idea of free enterprise. That is not capitalism in 2019
That is capitalism.
In America.
That is absolutely capitalism.
It's not where we're at.
It doesn't matter.
It's like 18th century capitalism. We have corporatism. We have corporatism. And the Republican Party right now represents multinational corporatism.
Trumpist protectionism and capitalism is the answer. You have protectionism to protect the interests of the working class. You don't have welfareism. You don't have this redistributionism. You have low taxes. You have low regulations. You have protectionism. That's Trumpism. And it's very effective. And it has an elite constituency.
Why don't you go to a Rust Belt working class bar where, there aren't jobs anymore because the manufacturing was sent to Asia? And why don't you go up to one of these fellows in a trucker cap and ask him what he thinks about capitalism? No, better yet, ask him to tell you how much he loves capitalism.
Ask him what he thinks of socialism.
You are so out of touch.
Ask him what he thinks of right-wing socialism.
And so you are saying that if one does not take the turbo-capitalist position, that makes one a socialist. Again,
I'm saying that. Are you in favor of redistribution or not? You talk about a wealth tax. Like, how do you justify that wealth tax? Is that in favor of redistribution or not?
I was making a joke, actually.
Okay.
I was repeating a joke that Ann Coulter made.
It does follow from your anti-capitalism.
The Pew Research has done extensive survey on this. Socially left and economically right voters are 3% of the electorate. Socially liberal, economically conservative, 3% of the electorate. That is the libertarian position. It is a loser position. It is 3%. There's more people that 10 times as many people.
Ask about right-wing socialism.
10 times as many people. Any government that collects taxes is to a certain extent redistributionist. Again, give your head a shake.
The military is to an extent redistributionist, but that's not the kind of redistribution that I'm talking about. You're talking about a rise in anti-capitalist sentiment, which broadly correlates with the idea of wealth taxes, the idea of large-scale redistribution, justified by the supposed oppressive nature of the capitalists.
What world do you think
talk about the oppressive nature of the capitalists,
what world do you think you live in? No, you do not live in the world that I live in.
You live in Crazy Town. Why do the people taking your position universally have these sorts of failings in their personal life, have these sorts of nothing to lose attitudes? I mean, why? And this burning resentment for the elites of their society.
But Kyle, the thing is the resentment grows because more and more people fall into what you would categorize as the loser bucket as wealth becomes disproportionately concentrated in the hands of the ultra 1%, mostly represented by people loosely related to yourself, who give no shits about native populations, who only care about their ability to travel to and from other, capitals of the world and make tons and tons of money and wage wars on countries like Venezuela or Iran that don't want to participate in international banking schemes. They must
mostly
be
white Gentiles.
No, they're not
mostly white Gentile males.
Again, your obsession with race.
Mostly white
crazy
Gentile males.
Obsession with race that I'm supposed to venerate evil men because they're white.
Every single second. You sound more like a leftist every single second.
Straight out the culture critique.
Yeah. Okay.
So wait, Kyle, isn't capitalism the notion of itself a Marxist idea.
Karl Marx was a great admirer of capitalism because he saw that it would bring about the destruction, the total destruction of tradition. Capitalism has an alienating effect. The early work of Marx is quite illuminating in this respect. To the extent that the capitalists gain power and control policy, people become alienated from their families, from their communities, from their country, from God. Karl Marx understood this, and that is why he cheered capitalism.
Capitalism is the gift of the West to the world. If you decry capitalism, you decry the West. Yep, you're historically illiterate, dude.
Beep bop boop bop. Wait. So I mean, obviously, Kyle? Don't you recognize that these things are tools? I think that's what many of us here are sort of seeing, is that capitalism is a tool, and you almost seem to be saying it yourself too, because you're saying protectionism is good. But then you're like, so then what would be the problem?
I'll tell you exactly what the problem is with right-wing redistributionism. It's because if you embrace anti-capitalism and you embrace redistributionism, then you have to recognize something that says that the biggest victims are the third worlders, are the racial minorities in the West, and you have to embrace your moral responsibility to redistribute to them, unless you take the step of saying that one's moral worth is completely connected to one's racial membership in some sort of ethno-nationalist group, right? That's actually the only logical way to square that circle. And that's a position that's basically only taken by complete losers, because it's an abdication of your personal identity for a collective identity, which is decried by the entire society. The only people who take that step are people with nothing to lose.
Why don't you tell us all about your fabulous life, Kyle?
Why don't you talk about your fabulous life?
I want to hear about your townhouse.
About your fabulous life.
I want to hear about that hot babe you're banging.
Let's talk about your fabulous life. Actually, I don't even want to talk about this, because this is Luke's show. This is Luke's show, and basically you're inviting such a tax.
You call me a loser.
You're in such a glass house.
You call me a loser. Okay, I'm a loser.
I don't want to call you a loser.
Why don't you did? You did.
I don't want to directly.
You did. Why don't you tell us about your fabulous life, Kyle?
No, I'm not going to talk about my fabulous fucking life. I'm happy to talk about Kevin's fabulous life if you want. But I'm not going to talk to Kevin anymore. He's been absolutely outrageous, and he repeatedly uses these personal jabs, and then refuses to address my points, and then gets all pissy, like a little. Okay, I'm not even going to say it. But he gets real fucking pissy when I actually give him back the medicine that he dishes out. That's what happens.
My final thoughts were on capitalism.
Yeah.
Okay. That what we talk about, as capitalism now, dates from the Industrial Revolution, which is really not that long ago. Okay, the use of the term in its present form is less than 2 centuries old. Now you can talk about capitalism deriving from the introduction of double entry bookkeeping, okay, in the Middle Ages. In any event, capitalism is fairly new on the human scene. And Kyle argues as if it is intrinsic to humanity, which clearly it is not. It is not intrinsic to virtue, because if it were, then there would have been no means for people to be virtuous before the introduction of capitalism. I'll just repeat what I said, that there is a middle ground between capitalism and socialism, or there is a school of thought which rejects both of those. And I think that capitalism is a tool which can be useful, but there has been a monstrous deformation of it. And again, this conflation of wealth with virtue, the capitalists or their supporters had better cut this out quickly, because they might find themselves losing their heads. That these working class people, when they hear this kind of talk, when they see rich people pretending to be poor people with their ripped jeans, when they see the increasing ostentation of rich people in an era when one increasingly needs political or family connections in order to get a decent job, if we want to preserve the useful parts of capitalism, then it is incumbent upon us to come down hard on its pretensions and on the deformations, because I said you want to look out for Ocasio-Cortez, because the speed with which she has become one of the most admired people in America, tells me that capitalism in its current form is in very serious trouble.